For 10 long years, Harper had cared for her ex-mother-in-law, Margaret, in a small weathered house on Willow Creek Road, tucked away in a quiet corner of Vermont. Margaret had been completely paralyzed after a devastating stroke, and while her own children jetted off to beach resorts and high society galas, Harper stayed. She sacrificed her youth, her freedom, and her dreams to remain at Margaret's side, feeding her, bathing her, comforting her through the long, silent nights. It wasn't out of obligation. It was love, unspoken, but real. Her ex-husband Nathan had disappeared years ago, leaving Harper and Margaret to fend for themselves. Meanwhile, Margaret's daughter Scarlett never missed a chance to remind Harper of her outsider status, calling her just the help in front of others, never offering so much as a thank you. Harper endured it all with quiet resilience, thinking maybe, just maybe, her sacrifices would be remembered. But when Margaret passed away, her will left all the prime properties and assets to her biological children. Harper was left with nothing but a dilapidated, half-rotting house no one wanted. The morning Margaret passed away felt strangely peaceful. Harper remembered how the sunlight filtered through the faded curtains, casting a golden hue over the small kitchen. Margaret had looked a little brighter than usual, her cheeks holding the faintest flush of color. "Could you make me a chicken pot pie?" she had whispered, her voice so frail it nearly disappeared in the hum of the refrigerator. Harper nodded, hiding the lump in her throat. She had made this dish for her hundreds of times over the years, but today it felt different. She cooked in silence, rolling the dough, seasoning the filling, all from memory, by feel, with a strange sense of calm hanging in the air. Margaret's eyes followed her from her spot on the worn recliner, as though she were trying to memorize Harper's every move. When the pie was ready, Harper carefully fed her one bite at a time. To her surprise, Margaret ate it all, even sipping warm broth with a soft smile on her lips. It was the first full meal she'd finished in weeks. "You've got quite the appetite today," Harper whispered, half joking. Margaret didn't respond, but there was something behind her gaze. Peace, maybe even release. That night, Harper woke with a start. The house was silent. Too silent. She rushed into the living room where Margaret lay still. Her hand was cold, her chest unmoving. Panic turned to devastation as Harper dropped to her knees beside her. "Margaret, Mom," she choked out, the word falling from her lips like a final prayer. Margaret was gone. At 9 a.m., the front door burst open. Scarlett, flushed with anger, stormed in, flinging her purse down. "What did you do?" she snapped. "What did you feed my mother?" Harper's grief exploded into fury. "Are you serious right now? You haven't been here in months. I was the one who stayed, who wiped her face, massaged her legs, held her hand while you were out celebrating your freedom. And now you come here to accuse me?" Scarlett's husband, Jason, stepped between them, trying to de-escalate. "Look, Harper, just give her a proper funeral. That's all we ask." But their words were already poisoned. The funeral turned into a battleground. Scarlett, Bradley, Margaret's youngest, along with their spouses, argued bitterly over properties, bank accounts, even the antique china. The houses Margaret had spent decades saving for were divided like poker chips. Harper watched from the corner, her heart numb. She wasn't offered a single thank you, not even a glance. When the lawyer read the will, Harper's name was barely mentioned. The only thing Margaret had left her was the rundown house on Willow Creek Road. 10 years. 10 years of sacrifice, loyalty, and love. And in the end, she was left with the crumbs. But fate wasn't finished. Because inside that old house, buried under warped floorboards, Harper was about to find something that would turn the story upside down. It started with a muddy footprint. Harper had been cleaning the hallway of the old house, the one Margaret had left her. The floorboards creaked beneath her steps, softened by time and worn by decades of life. She had scrubbed every inch of that place, wanting to leave it spotless, perhaps out of habit, or perhaps out of respect for the woman who had once called it home. She noticed the mark near the wall, a dark print smeared against the polished wood. Frowning, she leaned down and ran her fingers along the warped plank. Something felt hollow. Curious, Harper pried it up. What she found beneath the floor stole her breath. Bundles of $100 bills, layer after layer, perfectly wrapped and packed with care. Her hands trembled as she reached into the space, her pulse hammering like a drum. The air grew heavier with each bundle she uncovered, until finally, buried at the very bottom, she found a small yellowed envelope. It was crinkled, worn with time. On the front, in shaky handwriting, were 3 words: "For Harper only." She opened it slowly, afraid to breathe. Inside was a handwritten note from Margaret. "Dear Harper, this money is yours. I saved it for you, not for them. Stop waiting for Nathan. He's not worth your loyalty. You've given enough. Now take back your life. You were my daughter in every way that mattered. Please live free, sweetheart. I've always loved you like my own." Tears spilled down Harper's cheeks before she even finished reading. The weight of 10 years pressed down on her chest, then lifted all at once. She collapsed to the floor, clutching the letter, sobbing with a grief that was no longer just sadness, but gratitude too. It took her over 2 hours to count everything. $600,000 in cash, hidden away in the floor of a house everyone else had called worthless. Her knees ached. Her hands shook, but for the first time in years, she felt something she'd forgotten existed: hope. She stared at the money in disbelief. How had Margaret saved this much? Her children never guessed. They didn't know her, not really. But Margaret had seen Harper, seen her sacrifices, her heart, her unwavering care. And in secret, she had left behind something no will could declare. Not just money, validation, trust, love. Later that evening, Harper deposited the money into 2 separate bank accounts under her name. As she walked home, she couldn't shake the eerie feeling that someone had been watching her. The days following the discovery of the hidden money passed under a heavy, storm-like silence. Harper felt it deep in her bones. Someone was watching her. She didn't leave the house without scanning the streets. She double-locked the doors. She changed her routines. But no matter what she did, that uneasy feeling clung to her. And then, the truth struck like lightning. That evening, Harper took her parents and her son Eli out for a peaceful dinner at a cozy local restaurant. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of calm, until she returned from the restroom and froze. In a shadowed hallway nearby, she heard Tessa, Bradley's wife, speaking in a venomous whisper. "She's sitting there smiling like she just won the lottery. Just thinking about them spending our money makes me want to rip that bag right out of her hands." Harper stood still, heart pounding. Then came the blow. Nathan is probably dead anyway. But if she remarries, the money's gone. We should have gotten it. Maybe we can use Eli, make her soften up. A chill rushed down Harper's spine. Her hands shook as she fumbled to start the voice recorder on her phone. Every word Tessa spat out became evidence, undeniable proof of cruelty and calculated manipulation. She returned to the table with a composed smile, but fire was raging beneath her calm exterior. That night, she didn't sleep. She called the police and handed over the recording. The officer didn't brush it off. Threats, surveillance, coercion, they took it seriously. They advised her to file for an emergency restraining order. That moment broke something and built something else. Harper was done being passive, not because of the money, not because of betrayal, but because her child's safety was now on the line. The next morning, she stood in the kitchen, a cup of tea in hand, watching Eli draw dinosaurs at the table. Light danced on his hair. He was so innocent, so blissfully unaware of the darkness circling around them. She had lost 10 years of her life to caregiving, disappointment, and silence. She wouldn't lose one more second to fear. That day, Harper visited her lawyer and established a trust fund solely for Eli, with airtight clauses that excluded his father, Nathan, and every extended relative. No loopholes, no access, not even a legal battle could undo what she had set in place. On the outside, Harper remained soft-spoken and polite, but inside, a warrior had awakened. She saw Tessa for what she was, a snake, Scarlett, a manipulator in a silk dress, Nathan, a ghost who'd come back not for love, but for leverage. They thought Harper was still the woman who begged for a seat at the table. They were wrong. Harper wasn't asking to belong anymore. Now, she was the one building the table and locking the doors behind her. The morning air smelled different. It wasn't just spring arriving. It was something deeper. A shift inside Harper that had started quietly but was now impossible to ignore. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was choosing. After filing the protective order and securing Eli's trust fund, Harper took a walk through Willow Creek's community park. It had been years since she allowed herself to walk without purpose, to simply exist without obligation. The cherry blossoms were beginning to bloom, and the soft petals drifting through the air felt like an invitation, a fresh start. She watched as Eli ran ahead, giggling, pointing at ducks near the pond. He looked freer too, lighter, no longer burdened by the tension that had wrapped around their home, like invisible chains. And in that moment, Harper knew this chapter wasn't just about escape, it was about reinvention. That afternoon, she pulled out a folder she had tucked away years ago. Inside were notes for a dream she once had, a support service for overwhelmed women, especially those who had spent years caring for others while forgetting themselves. It wasn't about making money, it was about meaning, about creating something from all the pain, all the lessons. She picked up the phone and called Jenna, an old friend who now worked in family services. They hadn't spoken in years, but Jenna answered on the first ring. "Harper," she said, surprised. "I didn't think I'd hear from you again." "I've been stuck," Harper replied honestly. "But I'm ready now. I want to start something. I want to help people like me." They met for coffee 2 days later, and Harper poured her heart out. About the caregiving, the isolation, the silent strength it took to keep going. Jenna listened with eyes wide and soft. "You've got something powerful here," she said. "Real experience, real purpose. We need that is." For the first time in years, Harper felt seen, not as someone's ex-wife or unpaid caregiver or the quiet girl in the background, but as a woman with a voice and something valuable to offer. She began working from home, building the foundation for what she would later call the Nest Project, a safe space for women rebuilding after loss, betrayal, or burnout. Eli would sit beside her doing his homework while she researched, emailed, and planned. It wasn't easy, but every hour felt like healing. One evening, Eli looked up from his math worksheet and said, "Mom, you seem happier lately." Harper smiled. "I think I am." He nodded and returned to his paper, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. And maybe it was. Maybe healing didn't have to be loud. Maybe it started with quiet choices, with reclaiming space, with saying, "This life is mine now." Spring melted into early summer, and with every passing day, Harper was transforming. Her growth didn't arrive all at once. It came in small, quiet shifts. She no longer flinched when the phone rang. She caught glimpses of herself in the mirror, and for the first time in years, she liked the woman staring back. She was no longer the ex-daughter-in-law, no longer the unpaid caretaker. Now she was simply herself, a woman with purpose and value. Her project, The Nest, was no longer just an idea. It had become a haven. Every week, she hosted small gatherings at the local library. No stage, no lectures, just a circle of women, burned out, heartbroken, invisible, who found healing in shared silence and vulnerable stories. Harper didn't preach, she listened. One afternoon, in the middle of a quiet session, a middle-aged woman wiped her tears and whispered, "I thought I'd lost everything, but because of you, I think I can start again." Harper froze. That single sentence echoed deep inside her. She wasn't just guiding others toward healing. She was healing too. At home, Eli blossomed. Their house, once silent and heavy, now echoed with laughter and warmth. Harper pinned his quiz certificates to the fridge, cooked dinners with the radio playing, and watched him do homework beside her. One evening, Eli looked up and asked, "Mom, do you think I'm strong like you?" She smiled. eyes misty, and replied, "No, sweetheart, you're even stronger." And what about the ex-husband's family? After Harper handed over the recordings and documents to the police, Bradley and Tessa were summoned for questioning. Though they weren't criminally charged, their reputations were destroyed. Tessa was fired, clients abandoned her, and Bradley, drowning in gambling debt, disappeared after being pursued by loan sharks. They became the town's cautionary tale, a spectacle of greed and downfall. Scarlett withdrew into silence. Her reputation crumbled. Friends vanished. She blamed everyone except herself. Her pride couldn't protect her from the loneliness that followed. That night, while Eli slept soundly, Harper sat quietly on the porch, a forgotten cup of tea cooling in her hands. She looked up at the star-filled sky. There was no anger, no vengeance, just peace, the kind she had fought for through a decade of storms. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she belonged. Not to anyone else's story, but to her own. The breeze that drifted through the open window that morning felt different, gentler, like the world had finally exhaled. Harper stood in the kitchen, pouring tea, while Eli sat at the table, sketching a giant tree with a bird's nest. His laugh filled the room, warm and unguarded. That sound, it was the melody of a life finally free from shadows. She glanced around the house, the same walls, the same floors, but it wasn't the same space, not anymore. Now it held joy. Now it was hers. Later that afternoon, they walked to the community garden hand in hand. Eli chattered excitedly about his art class while Harper soaked in the sun, her steps unhurried. For the first time in years, she wasn't rushing. She wasn't carrying anyone else's burden. She was just present. "Mom," Eli said, tugging her arm, "when I grow up, I'll protect you like you protected me." Her throat tightened, but she smiled. "Deal," she whispered. That night, she sat alone on the porch while the town grew quiet around her. The stars blinked above, familiar and still. Inside, her son slept peacefully, his breathing soft, his world safe. Harper didn't need closure from the people who'd wronged her. She had something far greater now: clarity, freedom, and the quiet power of knowing she had survived and rebuilt. This was her story now, and she was finally home. Sometimes, the people we give the most to are the ones who never truly see us. Harper's story reminds us that devotion without recognition does not mean worthlessness. For 10 years, she gave her heart, her time, her strength, and received no gratitude in return. But real value isn't always found in a will, a handshake, or an apology. Sometimes it's found in a quiet letter, in the resilience we build, and in the children who see us clearly when others don't. The greatest lesson here is this: you don't need permission to matter. You don't need approval to heal. You don't need to hold on to broken people just to feel whole. When you choose peace over revenge, growth over resentment, and freedom over validation, you win in the most powerful way. Harper didn't become bitter. She became brave, and that's what true strength looks like. If you've ever felt unseen or undervalued, whether in a marriage, a family, or a job, Harper's journey is your mirror. Her story urges us to reclaim our space, even if it means starting over. Build your boundaries, guard your energy, and most importantly, trust your worth, even when others don't. Healing doesn't always come through confrontation. Sometimes it comes from walking away, building something new, and choosing joy without needing someone else's permission. If you're holding on to guilt, shame, or the hope that someone will one day realize your value, let go. Your peace matters more. If you enjoy deep, emotional, and meaningful stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new update. Your support is the motivation that drives us to keep bringing you powerful stories. Once again, thank you for being here, and see you in the next story.